the reason we're all here today, to put some people on must make it to the college football playoff watch. That was a real wordy title there.
Yeah, teams that need to make the playoff.
Teams that need to make the college football playoff. We're going to call you out right here. So here's how we're going to do this. We're going to go around the room and present a candidate for you must make the college football playoff, starting with Ole Miss. Ole Miss must make the college football playoff because of how much money they have put into this roster, on top of the fact that the window will ultimately close with Jackson Dart being done this year. That is my opinion. Ole Miss has to make a college football playoff this year.
I mean, that feels like the ultimate do or die situation, but even more so than Ohio State's right now, because Ohio State, you still feel pretty confident that Ohio State the next season is going to be in the similar position of you're going to be competing for a national title. Ole Miss, it's 2024 is your year. 2025, we have no idea what you're going to look like. You might have 5 losses on the schedule that next year.
And your boys already said that in 2025, Lane Kiffin's going to be the head coach at Florida. So I've already beaten everybody to that scoop, and it's going to happen. So, 2025, Florida's the team that Lane Kiffin's got to take to a natty and to a college football playoff, not Ole Miss. So there's that. The window, very tight, and just the general investment into the roster. I can't be spending that much money and you not make a college football playoff. You not be a top 11 team when would you say Ole Miss has they have a top 5 spending roster, right? Their payroll is top 5.
If they're not top 5, they're easily
not top 3.
10. Yeah.
So we all believe that. We all know that to be true, or at least believe that to be true. They have to make a college football playoff. We all agree on that one. Who else has a submission?
You want to go, Jay Will?
I think Penn State.
I like that one.
I think Penn State. I think that you have to.
Why?
Because that's kind of like you've already had these kind of similar expectations for Penn State leading into every single year. And for me personally, this feels like the first year where Penn State has a gap in the Big 12 or the Big 10, for you to make that happen. And again, like I said it last night, I could very easily see Penn State being 10-2 or 11-1 by the end of this season. And I just think it'd be a huge momentum boost for James Franklin. But again, with Michigan being where it's at now, Ohio State, obviously that's ahead of you. That's fine. Oregon can even be ahead of you. That's fine. But you've been finishing in the top 3 of the Big 10 for a while now. You should do it again this year, and I think you have to do it this year.
Not to mention the margins for error have been widened by 8 spots. Like, you don't have to be a top 4 team anymore. You have to be in the top 12. If you don't finish in the top 12 as Penn State, like, James Franklin is in a lot of trouble.
I'm looking at it now. The only, all right, mark it up. That's a loss. Ohio State, and they get them at home.
Yeah.
I would imagine that's going to be a whiteout. So it doesn't. It looks like a favorable schedule. It looks like a winnable schedule. West Virginia, Bowling Green, Kent State, Illinois, UCLA, USC, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Washington, Purdue, Minnesota, Maryland.
There's even a world where Penn State...
No Michigan, no Oregon. The toughest Big Ten matchups are Ohio State, USC, and Washington.
They should go 10-2 with that schedule.
Bar minimum. Minimum.
I mean, they could go 11-1.
They should go 11-1, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, I think with that schedule, and again, with just the overall circumstance of the Big Ten this year, I think it is a must make the playoff year for James Franklin and the Nittany Lions.
Oof, I agree with that one as well. He's fired at the end of the year then. Because I don't see it happening. Because that means, they might be the second best team in the Big Ten this year. I find that hard to believe, though.
Maybe. But I also think that, this is a thing that happens when you don't have divisions anymore. There is a world where Penn State goes 11-1, loses to Ohio State, and you don't play in the conference championship.
And there's also a world that Oregon's in that conference championship. They lose, making it their second loss. You only have 2, and you didn't lose recently, so you get the 11th spot. Oregon's sitting at home because they played in the conference championship.
Or you skip out the conference champion. You only have 1 loss, and it's to Ohio State, who's in the playoff, who's a top 4 seed.
And you're getting in anyways.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you're right. There's a strong possibility that they could be on this. Hey, you got to win. You got to win out and make a college football playoff. I'll allow it. Who do you got?
I've got the Clemson Tigers as a team that need to make the playoff.
LT Grace?
LT Grace.
Why?
Just because for 5 years now, Clemson has kind of been looked at as one of these prestige teams, and they have not lived up to the hype for 4 of those years, to a point where now, again, the margins are moved so much in your favor that all you have to do is essentially go 10-2, or even at worst 9-3, and you're a playoff team. And by the way, Clemson hasn't made the playoff since 2020.
When they made 6 in a row, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, and the fact is, like, Dabo Swinney's consistently been slipping down the ranks of coaching, and the fact that he's not ever going to go for a transfer portal guy is only going to make it look much worse if you don't make a playoff this year. Now, you can rectify all that if you do make a playoff and make a playoff game and can say, look, the system we have works. We made the playoff this year. We beat Florida State or whatever. We made the conference title game again. So, I think that Clemson is a team that really needs to make the playoff this year.
I think they need to improve on 9-4. I don't think they have to make a playoff this year.
I think it's a need to make the playoff. Because, like, I would
have to.
The way I would propose it, like, do you expect them to make the playoff?
I don't.
Do you expect them to make the playoff?
No.
I think they need
I don't think they have to make the playoff this year.
If the expectations are that they probably won't, then the expectations can't be that they have to.
That's kind of how I feel.
Josh,
I agree that they need to. Like,
Yeah.
Dabo Swinney needs to be back in the playoff.
Yeah, I mean, the title of this segment is teams that need to make the playoff this year.
I thought it was must.
It's must.
No, it says need to on my
In the show notes.
You got overruled on the
I didn't know
title.
that.
Well, order in the court, we're not allowing Clemson. Okay. Clemson is a needs to, not has to. However, Georgia and Texas and Ohio State are have tos, and I think that's the standard, and we'll just put them in this perennial have to. You'll have to make it.
I mean, do they have to, though?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your fan base is pissed. That's the have to.
Yeah, but what's the consequence? Your fan base is mad, and you come back.
The consequences for most of these are your head coach is potentially fired. That's not the case at either of these schools, except for maybe Ohio State. Some Ohio State fans might think that they're crazy.
Ryan Day's the most likely out of those three.
Yes, but those three teams entering the year, they have to make a college football playoff.
Dude, if neither one of those teams are in the top 12 at the end of the year,
insanity.
There's some bad things going on.
These are standard have tos.
Yeah.
Like your standard is a college football playoff. If you didn't make it, your season was a failure.
Okay.
For those three programs. Who else you got?
I put Utah in here.
I got Utah in here as well.
Because, I mean, people did it when they were in the Pac-12 they think that they were going to be a playoff team. There's multiple years, especially recently, where they were projected to be potentially a top 4 team. But now there's just no excuse for Whittingham and the Utes. There's no excuse anymore of like things that could go like, oh, it's because we pay in the Pac-12 and our schedule, or like our strength of schedule isn't as strong as the SEC, or like there's other conference bias and we just get written off. Like, you're in the Big 12, you get an automatic bid if you win the conference. People expect you to win the conference, even if you do just win 9 games. You should win that conference. You should be in the playoff this year.
I mean, now that we've changed the metrics on this segment, I'll still say I think Tennessee is a team that needs to make the playoff this year, because you had that great year in 2021. You came out in 2023, or 2022 was your great year. 2023 was basically like, hey, this is the year we win it all. Joe Milton's our guy, and you had a very disappointing season. Now it's at a point where, once again, the margins have been moved for you. Now you've got Nico. He's a really good quarterback. He's going to be in his first year starting, so there's going to be some growing pains, you'd have to assume. But if he's as good as was advertised and as good as he showed he was in that Iowa game, like, this has to be a year where you put things together and you can at least sneak it. Don't have to win the SEC. Don't even have to go to the SEC championship, but you at least have to be one of the 12 best teams at the end of the year.
I'm under the impression that because it's year 1 and you know you're going to get a year 2 under Nico, that it is a needs to, doesn't have to.
Correct.
You got a leeway here, but you can't go 8-5. That can't be it.
Correct.
Right? But you don't have to go 11-1 and be a top 8 seed. But you damn sure can't be 9-4 or 8-5.
Yeah, worst case for Tennessee this year is you go 9-3 and your 3 losses are Georgia, Alabama, and Oklahoma.
And you know what? You're never getting pissed off at that guy for that.
No.
That Oklahoma road loss, losing to Georgia, and who's the other in Texas? Alabama. Like, you can't get pissed off at that guy for doing that year 3 in your program after, he's still, by the way, he's still under scholarship limits. Mm-hmm. He's still serving Jeremy Pruitt's
That's right. Time. I forgot about that.
So I think that right there needs to be some leeway. And by the way, like, when has Tennessee football had this kind of momentum?
It's been a while.
A long time.
Fat Phil?
Yeah.
It's been that long. You can do the Kiffin thing, but he was in and out burning couches. I was
thinking that Bush Jones.
Oh, you Bush Jones and me? Even Tennessee fans knew that was Fugazi.
I don't know, dude. They had so much hype. Like, the Butch Jones era of like 2014, 2015. I might be misremembering that, but I remember Tennessee fans were very confident in their abilities that year.
Bro was a big Josh Dobbs fan.
I was not a Josh Dobbs fan, dude.
I'm gonna nix Tennessee here. I don't believe they have to.
That's fine.
Nor like Smooth's talking about in the chat. Now, he's an Alabama fan, notoriously, our one and only around here that's always in the chat. Thank you, Smooth.
Respect.
He is under the impression that Alabama has to make a college football playoff. And
No.
I don't believe that to be true. And, right, Kalen DeBoer's first year, you've got leeway here. You've got some time replacing a legend. There's really, really good SEC teams right now that are primed for a national title run, at least 3 that we know that are in your ballpark, you being one of the 4 that we think is a potential playoff contender, being Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas, and Alabama out of this conference. We can talk about Tennessee and other ones, but they're outside of this 4. I wouldn't do this to him, but you can, and here's why. If I'm an Alabama fan, I'd be really, really nervous that if he can't win with the roster that he has now, what makes me think that he's going to win with his own roster? We know what Kalen DeBoer does on the recruiting trail, at least at other stops, and it wasn't recruit like Nick Saban. Okay, so I could argue that Kalen DeBoer, from a pure talent basis, has the best roster right now that he might ever have at Alabama, and for that reason, it might be a must-win.
The pushback on that would be obviously that the talent that he has in the room isn't catered to what he wants to do. Like Jalen Milroe,
we could spin it both ways.
Yeah, like Jalen Milroe, as talented as he isn't probably going to fit into the system that Kalen DeBoer has traditionally ran. So, I mean, I think just to come out and say, hey, in your first year, you have to be one of the 12 best teams to make a playoff is astronomically insane to say.
Yeah, I don't think
that's not disrespect to the Alabama program.
No.
I don't care if you have the best program in the world. I don't care if you inherited the number 1 roster in college football. If it's your first year coaching, the baseline expectation should not be, hey, you have to make a playoff.
I also wouldn't even say that like they're Smooth is saying in the chat. I wouldn't even say that he got a Ferrari with his roster. I think you got a Ford F-150 and put a lift kit on it. Like you made a really cool vehicle a little cooler. I wouldn't say that Alabama has like tier 1 roster in all of college football right now, especially with the teams that you just listed, like even outside of the SEC. I would say that you have one of the better rosters, but let's not say like that roster is just full of world beaters. That guy that program got exposed to the transfer portal because Nick Saban left.
Right.
Yeah, we're gonna put them over here in the they don't get included in this have to. All right. Missouri.
Yeah, I have them on my list.
They're in the same boat, not as extreme with Ole Miss, but like it feels like
if not now, when?
Exactly.
Like if you don't make a college football playoff, when you return your entire offense and possibly the best wide receiver in the sport, if you don't make a college football playoff, you're not a top 11 program then. Like when are you going to be one?
I agree.
Is the question. Now, granted, he's done some high-end recruiting in spurts, but we know the SEC lifeblood is built off of player acquisition and making your roster as good and as talented as possible. And they have a top 3 or 4 SEC roster right now, or will play like that this fall. The same cannot be said for the future of their program. I don't think we can say that about next year or the year after that. So this is a must make a playoff. I'm not saying you got to win a title, but you got to be playing in January this year if you're Missouri.
I agree with that one.
I mean, got to cash in on that last year of Luther Burden, Brady Cook. Like, you got to returned a big chunk of your production from last year. A lot of momentum in your favor. Can't say the same for next year.
Do we have any other ones?
I've got one more. Okay. I think Florida State needs to make the playoff this year just to avoid the comeback to earth moment. Because as we all know how that season ended last year for them, if you don't follow it up with at the very least being in the conversation come late December, early January of, hey, this is a national title contending team, everything that happened in 2023 kind of goes out the window, in my opinion. Like, Mike Norvell goes back to like, hey, can he build Florida State back up to maybe competing for national titles? Was 2023 a fluke? Was it a Jordan Travis year? Yada, yada, yada. You have to avoid that and at least make the playoff this year. Obviously, it's not you miss it and you're astronomically in trouble, or Mike Norvell's on the hot seat or anything like that. But you have to avoid that discussion of, hey, 2023 was kind of a fluke because look what you did the following year.
Florida State's got a 1-month season. You ready? Clemson, Duke, Miami, North Carolina, Notre Dame, back to back to back to back to back.
Wow.
It's got to be the toughest schedule in the ACC, right?
It's the toughest stretch for sure.
Yeah. What's after that?
They play Charleston Southern and then Florida.
Okay.
At home against Florida. So that right there will determine whether or not Mike Norvell is a guy. I don't love the roster. I'm gonna be honest with you.
No, I don't think it's anything compared to what they had last year.
I don't even think it's fair to say that they have to be a top 11 team. I'm marking them out of must win. I'm with you. I understand the point of the discussion. It's like, hey man, y'all had a great season last year. Let's make sure it's not a Cinderella season. Let's make sure you're not Gus Malzahn's, Gene Chiswick's Auburn Tigers. Let's make sure you weren't a flash in the pan. Let's make sure you're a real football coach. I think his ability to have turned that program around at the rate and the speed at which he did proves to me he is a really good football coach.
Correct.
But they are far closer to an 8-5 roster than they are a 13-0 roster, and I don't think that's debatable.
No, I wouldn't debate that at all.